I'm Joseph Holmes, culture critic at Religion Unplugged. Lee Strobel is a New York Times bestselling author of more than 40 books that have sold over 18 million copies worldwide. He's a former award-winning legal editor at the Chicago Tribune. He's been best known for his classic, The Case for Christ. His work has been translated into more than 40 languages. His latest book, Seeing the Supernatural, is a national bestseller. His documentary, The Case for Miracles, is in theaters as a fan event, December 15th through 18th. Lee, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Joseph. I sure appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so jumping right in here,
Yeah.
your book about the supernatural and your movie, The Case for Miracles,
Yeah.
what prompted you to want to make to go after miracles?
Yeah, I think because there are so many cases where we have solid documentation that these stories are not just something you read on the internet that have no basis in fact, but these are cases with strong evidence supporting them. Because I believe if you have solid medical documentation, if you have multiple credible eyewitnesses with no motive to deceive, if there's no natural explanation for what took place, and if it takes place in the context of prayer, and you've got a case, a clear-cut case of, say, a supernatural healing, that's powerful evidence that God does exist. It deepens the faith of Christians, but I think it also can pique the curiosity of people who are kind of spiritually interested but not quite sure what to believe in yet.
Yeah, so you are most famous for your book, obviously, The Case for Christ, which
Yeah.
was turned into a movie. And one of the powerful things about that story is that you were not a Christian and you
Right.
were looking at the evidence for Christianity, and though that convinced you that Christianity was true.
Yeah.
But you are coming at this from a slightly different perspective now, trying to
Yes.
do The Case for Miracles. You are a believer who's already
Right.
a Christian, who already starts from there. So you were saying, okay, if I understand it correctly,
Yeah.
I believe in Christianity, I believe in faith, I believe in miracles. I want to go around documenting these things that I've heard of in order to bolster other people's faith in
That's
that way.
true. And also to reach out to the spiritually curious. I mean,
Yes.
I want to drag as many people to heaven with me as I can. So,
Yeah. What better thing could there be to do? Spend your time doing it.
yeah, there you go.
But I did want to ask, did
Yeah.
you find yourself changing in any way in terms of your own way of looking at your faith or miracles in general going on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, for me, every documented case that we encountered, and these are cases often where I got to interact with the very person whose case was reported, for instance, in a peer-reviewed medical journal, documented by multiple medical researchers. I got to interview these people. I got to hang out with them. I got to know them. I got to check their personal style and their personality and so forth, and to see what God has done in their life. It every time I did that, it deepened my faith. It encouraged me. It made me more in awe of God. And the fact that here we are in the 21st century, and guess what? God is still in the miracle business today.
So this is really interesting. I want for our listeners to understand this kind of internal conversation that goes on among the religious, particularly Christians in this
Yeah,
case. There's kind of two camps, and one of them has a subgroup to them. One, of course, is the continuationists who believe
yes,
that miracles that God's in the Bible, he still does them today. And then there's others who are called the cessationists, not
yeah,
to be confused with secessionists, which is a
right.
completely different thing.
That's true.
We believe that God did miracles in the Old Testament, but it ended with the apostles afterwards. And of course, then there's the subgroup of the continuationists, which is humorously called the open but cautious group, which I sort of fall into
Yeah,
that camp, the open but cautious group. And I have to say, I'm wanting, this is really personal to me because I've found myself becoming, let's say, over time, less open and more cautious
mm,
as I go, as I see more and more cases. Because
yeah,
for me, I keep running into certain questions that about these documented cases that I don't find many people really able to answer very adequately. So you can speak
mm,
to me as well as some of the more skeptical but open,
yeah,
people in the room. One of the things I find is that you do have in these cases documented cases of people who are not who are in a bad state. They're dead, or they sometimes, or they are really ill or something else.
yeah,
And then of course there's a prayer, and then there's healing.
yeah,
Thing is, a lot of these cases that I find, a there are individual cases that could have some other explanation. Now,
Yeah.
it's unlikely, maybe,
Hmm.
but you have a lot of cases where, doctors get diagnoses wrong.
That's
And
right.
then in both directions, like they think
That's
someone's
right.
going to get better and they don't, or
Yep.
they don't think they're going to get better and they do.
Yep.
Whenever people have done, it seems to me, as far as I can tell, done these trials of like, okay, double blind trials of like,
Yeah.
okay, somebody's going to pray for this group of people and this group of people is not going to get prayed for, and see how much more likely people are to get healed in the prayer circumstance.
Yeah.
It seems like there's no difference in the people that get prayed for versus
Okay.
not prayed
Yeah.
for. So that's
Let me address that.
Yeah, address that one. I have one other question
Yeah.
but on the objection front, but address that one first. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that for a lot of cessationists, there's kind of two camps of cessationists. One camp says that miracles still happen. They still believe that God is doing miracles, but they don't believe that God continues to gift people to have a spiritual gift of healing.
Okay.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm open to God continuing to do miracles because I see the evidence of it. Does he still gift people? I don't. I'm open but cautious on that issue. So now, further, if you look at the study I think you're referring to, was a 10-year Harvard study. It cost $10.4 million, in which they had people praying for people who were recovering, I believe, from heart attacks. And it showed that those who were prayed for had no benefit compared to people who weren't prayed for. There's a major problem with that, which I point out in my book and in the movie. There's a major problem with that study. The only Protestants who were recruited to pray in that study did not even believe in miracles. They didn't even believe in a personal God. They were part of a cult. That they were not mainstream Christians. And so I think
it's a big problem.
Yeah, it's a big problem. And then secondly, here's the study that I think is the most powerful, published, by the way, in a secular, scientific, peer-reviewed medical journal, a scientifically rigorous study where a professor with a PhD from Harvard, currently a professor at Indiana University, major secular university, sent a team of researchers to Mozambique, where there had been a cluster of miracles. And they tested people scientifically. They went into the rural areas and said, bring us all your deaf and blind or people with severe hearing or vision problems. They brought them, and then they tested them scientifically right then. What is their vision, level of vision? What is their level of hearing? Then immediately after that, they're prayed for in the name of Jesus. And then immediately after that, they're tested again. Was there any improvement? Was there any change? Guess what they found? In virtually every case, there was improvement. In fact, get this, the average improvement in visual acuity was tenfold. There was a woman named Martine who, when they first encountered her, could not hear the equivalent of a jackhammer next door. After 10 minutes of prayer in the name of Jesus, she could hear normal conversations. Well, the researchers were so blown away by this, they said, we got to test this again. So they went to Brazil, where miracles are clustering because the gospel is just breaking in certain areas. They did the same test. They got the same results. This is a scientifically rigorous study, again, published in the Southern Medical Journal, a secular, scientific, peer-reviewed medical journal. That is good science, and that tells us something is going on.
Okay, and very quickly, I want to bring up one other objection, which is the fact that overwhelmingly it seems like the kinds of miracles that are done are things that could have another explanation versus ones that don't.
Great question.
So there's an old website which was God Hates Amputees, which is like, we rarely see amputee miracles. We more see these possible placebo miracles. Not accepting it. So what is your pushback on that?
Yeah, great question. And to me, there's 4 qualifications to be a legitimate miracle. It must be something that is well documented medically. So we got documentation of it. We have to have multiple credible eyewitnesses with no motive to deceive. There cannot be a natural explanation that makes sense, and it takes place in the context of prayer. So I agree with you 100%. There are cases of fraud. There are cases of mistaken things where people think they're miracles, but they're not. But the cases we document are cases where there is no natural explanation. A woman blind with juvenile macular degeneration, a incurable condition, blind for 12 years. She went to a school for the blind. She learned to read Braille. She walked with a white cane. She married a Baptist pastor. One night he comes up to her. She's in bed. He puts his hand on her shoulder, begins praying, crying, saying, God, I know you can heal my wife. I know you can do it. And I pray you do it tonight. And with that, she opens her eyes and she says, I've got perfect eyesight. She sees her husband for the first time. She says, after years of darkness, I can see. This is a miracle. I don't know how you explain, first of all, an incurable condition being spontaneously healed right after a prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Now, you can continue, you can always ratchet up skepticism to what I think is an unreasonably high level. But I think a rational person seeing that would say there's something going on there. And I think it's something supernatural.
Well, thank you so much, Lee. This has been fantastic. The book is Seeing the Supernatural, and the movie is The Case for Miracles, in theaters as a Fathom event, December 15th through 18th. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Joseph. God bless you.
God bless you too.